A German shepherd was found unconscious on top of her puppies, lying in a ditch, but it was a baby's reaction that stopped everything and touched everyone passing by. Subscribe to the channel and see how this unexpected act changed everything. The moist earth barely absorbed the weak heat from the sun on that cloudy morning in rural Vermont. Between dry branches and rusty cans, a muffled whimper emerged from the low vegetation at the edge of a back road. Little Tommy Wilson, not even 2 years old, remained motionless, his eyes fixed on an image that no adult would easily forget. There, inside a shallow ditch, an unconscious German shepherd rested on top of 3 newborn puppies, its thin and weakened body forming an involuntary shield over them. Tommy, whose chubby knees were still dirty with grass, had discreetly escaped from his grandparents' garden after following the faint sound of whimpering. His wobbly walk, typical of someone still exploring the world with uncertain steps, led him straight to where a nearly silent scene was screaming for help. Contrary to what many might expect, the toddler didn't cry or run back. He carefully bent down and tried, with his small hands, to push away the branches around the ditch. The unpretentious and instinctive gesture was witnessed by Eleanor Murphy, an elderly woman who was passing by the road with her shopping cart. The image of that small human trying to help something he barely understood generated an immediate impulse in her. This was the first of many turns that would transform the story into something deeply unforgettable. When Eleanor rushed to the child, she saw up close the critical condition of the German shepherd. The dog was breathing with difficulty, and her puppies, underneath her body, still alive, were shaking with cold and hunger. With a cell phone in her trembling hands, she contacted a local rescue group. While waiting, she covered the animals with a wool scarf she wore around her neck, protecting them from the cutting breeze. The rescue team took less than 20 minutes to arrive, but in that short interval, another touching event occurred. Tommy had sat down next to the ditch, leaning against the cold mud, as if wanting to keep the puppies company. One of the newborn dogs, weak, managed to crawl to the child's little hand, resting on his fingers. This image, captured by one of the rescuers, would touch hearts around the world in the days that followed. Sarah Jenkins, the head of the rescue team, had seen many heart-wrenching cases in her 15 years of animal rescue work, but something about this scene struck her differently. Perhaps it was the innocent determination in Tommy's eyes, or the way the mother dog had used her last ounce of strength to protect her babies. "I've never seen anything quite like this," Sarah whispered to her colleague Mark Reynolds as they carefully lifted the dog onto a stretcher. Most abandoned mothers either hide their puppies or abandon them when they can't care for them anymore. This one literally used her body as a shield. Mark nodded silently as he gently placed the 3 tiny puppies in a heated transport box. The smallest one, with a distinctive white patch on its chest, kept trying to crawl back toward Tommy, who watched the entire procedure with unusual focus for a child his age. "Whose kid is this?" Sarah finally asked, realizing that a toddler, wandering alone near a back road, was another emergency in itself. Eleanor, who had been holding Tommy's hand throughout the rescue, explained, "I believe he belongs to the Thompson family. Their house is just beyond those trees. Martha and Robert Thompson, they're raising their grandson since." She paused, careful not to mention any tragic circumstances in front of the child, since his parents aren't able to care for him. Sarah nodded understandingly. The Thompson situation was known in their small community of Oak Ridge. Their daughter Lily had battled substance abuse issues and was currently in a rehabilitation center in Burlington. The custody situation was complicated at best. "I'll take him back home while you take care of these poor creatures," Eleanor offered, her voice cracking slightly. There was something in her expression, a distant pain that Sarah couldn't quite place, that suggested this situation had touched a deep, perhaps long-buried memory. As the rescue team finished loading the animals into their van, Tommy began to cry, not the typical tantrum of a toddler being separated from something interesting, but a heart-wrenching sob that seemed to contain genuine concern. The tiny puppy with the white chest patch responded with equally distressed whimpers. "That's unusual," Mark commented, watching the interaction. "It's almost like they've bonded already." Dr. Emily Collins, the veterinarian who had arrived with the rescue team, observed the scene with professional interest. Animals in distress can form rapid attachments to whoever they perceive as helpers or protectors, but I've rarely seen it happen this quickly, especially with a newborn puppy. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Collins approached Eleanor and Tommy. "Would you mind bringing the boy to visit at the shelter tomorrow? It might help the puppies adjust. Sometimes these connections can be therapeutic for both the animals and the humans involved." Eleanor looked down at Tommy, who had stopped crying, but was still staring at the van with the puppies. "I think we can arrange that, can't we, Tommy? We'll talk to your grandma Martha first." The drive to the animal shelter was tense. The mother dog's condition was deteriorating rapidly, her breathing becoming more labored. Dr. Collins worked frantically in the back of the van, setting up an IV line and administering emergency fluids and antibiotics. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, infected wounds on her hind legs, possible internal bleeding. She listed off to Sarah, who was driving as smoothly as possible while maintaining urgency. "It's a miracle she survived this long." "What are her chances?" Sarah asked, her eyes meeting Emily's in the rearview mirror. The veterinarian's silence was answer enough. Meanwhile, Eleanor walked Tommy back to the Thompson residence, a modest farmhouse with a well-maintained garden surrounded by a white picket fence. The very fence Tommy had somehow managed to escape from earlier that morning. Martha Thompson was in a state of panic when Eleanor arrived with her grandson. "Tommy, oh my God, where did you find him? We've been searching everywhere," she cried, rushing down the porch steps to scoop up the toddler in her arms. "He wandered quite a way down the back road," Eleanor explained, deciding to ease into the full story. "Martha, something quite extraordinary happened today." As Eleanor recounted the events, Martha's expression shifted from relief to amazement. Robert joined them on the porch, his weathered farmer's hands still dirty from searching the fields for his missing grandson. "That's our Tommy," he said with a mixture of pride and concern. "Always had a way with animals, just like his mother used to before." He trailed off, exchanging a meaningful glance with his wife. Eleanor noticed the unspoken communication between the couple. There was more to this family's story than the community gossip had revealed. She felt a sudden connection to their struggle, a connection she couldn't quite explain, but that resonated deeply within her. "The shelter wants Tommy to visit the puppies tomorrow," Eleanor mentioned cautiously. "The veterinarian thinks it might help their recovery. One of them seems particularly attached to him already." Martha and Robert exchanged another look, this one more complicated, filled with hesitation and perhaps a touch of fear. "We'd need to discuss it," Martha finally said. "Our situation with Tommy is delicate right now. We're in the middle of some legal matters regarding his custody." Eleanor nodded understandingly, though she couldn't help but feel a strange sense that these animals and this child were somehow meant to find each other, that perhaps there was something larger at work here than mere coincidence. At Oak Ridge Animal Shelter, the overnight staff worked tirelessly to stabilize the German Shepherd. Dr. Emily Collins had barely left the dog's side, monitoring her vital signs and adjusting medications as needed. The 3 puppies, estimated to be less than a week old, were being bottle-fed every 2 hours by volunteers. "Any change?" Sarah Jenkins asked as she entered the clinic area early the next morning, 2 coffee cups in hand. Emily accepted the coffee gratefully, dark circles under her eyes betraying her sleepless night. "She's hanging in there, against all odds. I've named her Luna, seemed fitting for a mother fighting through the darkness," Sarah smiled at the name. And the little ones? They're doing better than expected, though the smallest one, the one with the white patch, is refusing to eat much. Emily's brow furrowed with concern. It's strange. He takes a few sips and then just turns away, no matter which volunteer tries to feed him. The conversation was interrupted by the shelter receptionist, Maggie, poking her head through the door. "Dr. Collins, you have some visitors. It's about the puppies from yesterday." Emily and Sarah exchanged surprised glances. It was barely 8 a.m. In the reception area stood Eleanor Murphy, alongside Martha and Robert Thompson. Between them, holding onto his grandmother's hand, was little Tommy, dressed in overalls and a red sweater, his eyes wide with anticipation. "I hope we're not too early," Martha apologized, but Tommy wouldn't eat breakfast. He kept pointing at the door and making those little sounds he makes when he wants something. Eleanor smiled, knowingly. "I think he remembers the puppies." Emily knelt down to Tommy's level. "Hello again, little one. Would you like to see the puppies?" Tommy nodded enthusiastically, the most expressive communication he'd offered since arriving. "We need to be honest. With you," Robert interjected, his voice carrying the weight of a man accustomed to hard truths. "Tommy doesn't speak yet. The doctors say it might be developmental, or it might be—" He glanced at his wife, who nodded encouragingly. "It might be related to trauma from his early life with his mother, our daughter Lily." Emily nodded, her clinical demeanor softening. "I understand. Many children communicate perfectly well without words. Let's see how he does with our little patients." Leading the group to the nursery area, Emily explained the condition of Luna and her puppies. The mother is still in critical condition, but she's a fighter. The puppies are stable, though the smallest one isn't eating well. As they entered the quiet room where the puppies were being kept in a heated enclosure, Tommy immediately pulled away from his grandmother and moved toward the glass-fronted incubator with surprising determination. "Careful, honey," Martha cautioned, but Emily gestured for her to let him approach. "It's okay. I'll watch him carefully." What happened next left everyone in the room speechless. Tommy stood on his tiptoes, peering into the incubator at the 3 tiny puppies. The smallest one, with the white chest patch, immediately began to wriggle, its tiny nose working frantically as if picking up Tommy's scent. "Well, I'll be," Robert whispered. Emily, acting on pure instinct, carefully opened the incubator and lifted out the smallest puppy, cradling it in a warm blanket. "Would you like to sit and hold him, Tommy? You need to be very gentle." Martha looked alarmed. "Is that safe? For the puppy, I mean." "Normally, I wouldn't suggest it with a newborn this young," Emily admitted. "But given what we witnessed yesterday and the fact that this little one isn't eating well, sometimes medicine requires thinking outside the box." They helped Tommy sit in a small chair, showing him how to support the puppy's tiny body. The moment the puppy was settled in Tommy's lap, a remarkable transformation occurred. The previously restless animal calmed immediately, its tiny body relaxing against Tommy's steady hands. "I've never seen anything like it," Sarah whispered, watching the interaction with wonder. Eleanor, who had remained quietly observant until now, moved closer. "Sometimes souls recognize each other," she said softly, her voice carrying an undertone of personal knowledge that made the others look at her curiously. Emily seized the opportunity. She prepared a small bottle of puppy formula and handed it to Tommy's grandfather. "Mr. Thompson, could you help Tommy offer this to the puppy? I want to see if he'll eat now." Robert crouched beside his grandson, gently guiding his hand to hold the tiny bottle near the puppy's mouth. To everyone's amazement, the puppy immediately began to suckle vigorously, taking more formula in those few minutes than it had all night. "It's him," Emily confirmed, her scientific mind racing to understand the phenomenon she was witnessing. "This puppy has somehow bonded with your grandson." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Tommy hasn't connected with anything like this since..." She paused, composing herself. Since he came to live with us. Eleanor placed a supportive hand on Martha's shoulder, a gesture that spoke of understanding beyond words. Emily's professional curiosity was piqued. Would it be possible for Tommy to visit regularly, at least until the puppies are stronger? I think this little one's survival might depend on it. Martha and Robert exchanged apprehensive glances. There's something you should know, Robert said finally, his voice low. We're in the middle of a custody battle for Tommy. His mother, our daughter, is challenging us for custody now that she's completed her latest rehab program. We're not supposed to make any major changes to his routine or environment until the case is settled. Sarah, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. This wouldn't be a change to his home environment. It would just be visits to help save a life. Surely no judge would object to that. Actually, Eleanor interjected thoughtfully, this situation might even help your case. It shows Tommy is forming healthy attachments and developing empathy. Those are important developmental milestones. Martha seemed to consider this. How often would he need to visit? Ideally, twice a day for feedings, Emily replied, watching as the puppy finished the bottle and snuggled contentedly against Tommy's small chest. Morning and evening, perhaps. I could help with transportation, Eleanor offered quickly. I'm retired and my schedule is flexible. The Thompsons looked surprised at the offer from a woman they barely knew. Sensing their hesitation, Eleanor continued, I understand I might seem like a stranger to you, but I feel connected to this situation somehow, like I was meant to be there yesterday, on that road at that exact moment. Dale. There was something in Eleanor's tone, a depth of emotion that hinted at personal history that resonated with Martha. We appreciate the offer, Ms. Murphy. Perhaps we could discuss it further. While the adults talked logistics, Tommy remained focused entirely on the puppy, gently stroking its tiny head with one finger. For the first time in months, he seemed fully present, his usual vacant expression replaced by one of pure concentration and what could only be described as joy. Dr. Collins observed this with growing conviction that the connection between child and puppy was more than coincidence. In her 15 years of veterinary practice, she had witnessed many cases of animal-human bonding, but this was different, immediate, profound, and seemingly essential to both parties. What should we name them? Sarah asked, bringing everyone's attention back to the puppies. All three need names. Tommy looked up at the question, his eyes suddenly bright with interest. What do you think, Tommy? Robert asked, crouching beside his grandson. What should we call this little guy you're holding? To everyone's surprise, Tommy made a small sound and pointed to the window where morning sunlight was finally breaking through the clouds, casting a ray of light across the room. Light? Martha suggested. Is that what you're trying to say, honey? Tommy shook his head and made the sound again, pointing more insistently at the beam of sunlight where dust motes danced in the golden glow. Hope, Eleanor whispered. I think he's trying to say hope. Tommy turned to Eleanor with a smile so sudden and bright that it startled everyone in the room. He nodded vigorously. Hope it is then, Emily declared, making a note on the puppy's chart. What about the other two? The naming became a group effort. The second puppy, a female with a brown spot over one eye, was named Faith, after Robert suggested it reminded him of his late mother's unwavering optimism. The third, the largest of the litter with unusually strong legs already, was named Spirit. Martha's contribution, explaining that it would take a strong spirit for all of them to survive what they'd been through. As they finalized the arrangements for Tommy's visits, Emily took Eleanor aside. That was remarkable, how you knew exactly what Tommy was trying to communicate. Are you a child development specialist? Eleanor's eyes took on a distant quality. No, nothing like that. I understand children who communicate differently. I had a son once who was very much like Tommy. Before Emily could inquire further, they were interrupted by Maggie rushing into the room. "Dr. Collins, Luna is awake. She's trying to move." The news of Luna's awakening sent a ripple of excitement through the room. Dr. Emily Collins rushed to the intensive care unit, followed closely by Sarah, while Martha and Robert stayed behind with Tommy and the puppies. Eleanor lingered at the doorway, caught between following the medical drama unfolding with Luna and remaining with the child who had, in less than 24 hours, captured her heart in ways she couldn't yet articulate. In the ICU, Luna was indeed awake, her amber eyes alert despite her weakened state. When she spotted Emily, her tail thumped weakly against the examination table, a gesture that brought tears to the veterinarian's eyes. "Hey there, fighter," Emily whispered, gently checking Luna's vitals. "You gave us quite a scare." Sarah stood by, amazement evident on her face. "I honestly didn't think she'd make it through the night." "Neither did I," Emily admitted, studying the monitors. "Her values are still critically low. But the fact that she's conscious and responsive is nothing short of miraculous." She paused, a thought occurring to her. "I wonder." Without finishing her sentence, Emily stepped out briefly and returned with Martha, who was carrying Tommy. The moment Luna saw the child, her reaction was immediate and unexpected. Her tail wagging intensified, and she made a soft whimpering sound, trying unsuccessfully to lift her head. "It's okay, girl," Emily soothed, motioning for Martha to bring Tommy closer, but still maintaining a safe distance. "Save your strength." Tommy reached out his small hand toward Luna, his eyes wide with concern and recognition. Though they kept him at a safe distance, the connection between child and dog was unmistakable. "It's as if they know each other," Martha whispered, her voice tinged with wonder. Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Animals sometimes form intense bonds in moments of crisis. Luna must associate Tommy with the rescue of her puppies." For the next week, a routine developed that gradually transformed the lives of everyone involved. Every morning and evening, either Martha or Robert would bring Tommy to the shelter, with Eleanor often accompanying them. Tommy would spend time with Hope, the puppy who had formed such a powerful bond with him, assisting with feedings and simply sitting quietly as the tiny animal slept against his chest. The other puppies, Faith and Spirit, were thriving under the constant care of the shelter staff, but Hope only seemed truly content when Tommy was present. Luna's recovery, while slow, continued to defy medical expectations. The infected wounds on her hind legs were healing, and she was gradually regaining strength. Dr. Collins had started allowing brief, supervised visits between Luna and her puppies, with Tommy always present. These reunions seemed to accelerate Luna's healing in ways that medicine alone could not explain. As these visits became the cornerstone of Tommy's routine, subtle changes began to appear in the previously withdrawn child. He remained largely nonverbal, but his expressions became more animated, and he occasionally produced sounds that seemed like deliberate attempts at communication, especially when interacting with Hope. One evening, as they were preparing to leave after a particularly successful feeding session, Eleanor approached Martha while Tommy said his goodbyes to the puppies under Robert's supervision. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Eleanor began hesitantly, "but has Tommy always been nonverbal?" Martha's expression clouded slightly, but she seemed to sense genuine concern rather than mere curiosity in Eleanor's question. "No, he actually started speaking early, full sentences by 18 months, but then things changed when he witnessed—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "A traumatic incident involving his mother." Eleanor nodded sympathetically, not pressing for details. "I noticed he seems to be trying to communicate more now, especially around the puppies." "Yes, we've noticed that too," Martha admitted, a cautious hope warming her voice. "Our family therapist says animals can sometimes reach children in ways humans can't, especially after trauma." Eleanor was quiet for a moment before responding. I know this might sound strange coming from someone who was a stranger just a week ago, but I feel there's something special happening here, something beyond coincidence. Martha studied Eleanor's face, noting the depth of emotion in the older woman's eyes. You lost someone, didn't you? The directness of the question caught Eleanor off guard. She glanced toward Tommy, ensuring he was still occupied. My son Jeffrey, she finally answered, her voice barely above a whisper. He was 4. It was a long time ago, over 40 years now. I'm so sorry, Martha said, genuine compassion in her voice. Eleanor shook her head slightly, as if dispelling a memory. What struck me that day on the road when I found Tommy with the dogs was how much he reminded me of Jeffrey, not in appearance, but in that pure instinct to help something vulnerable. Jeffrey was like that, always bringing home injured birds or stray kittens. Before Martha could respond, they were interrupted by an unexpected commotion. Tommy, who had been quietly petting Hope, suddenly pointed at Luna and made a distinct sound. Mama. Robert froze, his eyes wide with surprise. Did he just... Tommy repeated the sound, more clearly this time, pointing first at Luna and then at the puppies. Mama! Martha rushed to her grandson's side, kneeling beside him. That's right. Tommy, Luna is the puppy's mama. Dr. Collins, who had entered to check on Luna's evening medications, watched the scene unfold with professional interest. This is remarkable. It's his first word since the incident? Robert nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. Martha wrapped her arms around Tommy, who continued pointing between Luna and the puppies, repeating "Mama" with growing confidence. Eleanor stood back, watching the family moment with a mixture of joy and a strange, bittersweet nostalgia. Dr. Collins noticed her expression and moved to stand beside her. Are you okay? The veterinarian asked quietly. Eleanor nodded, blinking away unexpected tears. More than okay. Sometimes the universe has a way of healing old wounds through new beginnings. The following day brought another surprise. Jessica Harlow, a prominent family attorney in Burlington, arrived at the animal shelter asking specifically for the Thompson family. She found them in the puppy nursery, where Tommy was having his morning visit with Hope. Mrs. and Mr. Thompson. Jessica approached, extending her hand professionally. I'm Jessica Harlow. I understand you're currently involved in a custody case regarding your grandson. Martha tensed, immediately instinctively moving closer to Tommy. Yes, but how did you... Jessica smiled reassuringly. I apologize for the unexpected visit. I was contacted by Eleanor Murphy regarding your situation. She didn't share any confidential details, she added quickly, noting Martha's alarmed expression. Just that there was a family in need of specialized legal assistance in a complicated custody case. Robert stepped forward protectively. With all due respect, Ms. Harlow, we already have a lawyer. Court appointed, if I'm not mistaken, Jessica responded gently. I'm offering my services pro bono, family law, with an emphasis on grandparentee. Custody rights is my specialty. Martha and Robert exchanged uncertain glances. That's very generous, Martha began cautiously. But why would you... Let's just say I believe in what's happening here, Jessica interrupted, gesturing toward Tommy and Hope. Eleanor shared with me how your grandson found these puppies, how he's been helping with their care, and the progress he's made. As someone who regularly argues before family court judges about what constitutes a nurturing environment for children overcoming trauma, I can tell you this is exactly the kind of stability and positive development that strengthens a custody case. The conversation was interrupted by Sarah Jenkins, who burst into the nursery with excitement. You won't believe this! The story has gone viral! What story? Robert asked, confused. Sarah held up her tablet, displaying a social media page, where a photo of Tommy sitting beside the ditch with one of Luna's puppies touching his hand had been shared thousands of times. The caption read, The littlest hero, toddler discovers abandoned dog family, leads rescue effort. One of our volunteers posted this with permission from our media release forms, Sarah explained, scrolling to show dozens of comments expressing admiration and offers of support. Donations to the shelter have tripled overnight, and we've had calls from 3 different news stations wanting to do features. Martha looked horrified. But Tommy's custody case, publicity could complicate things terribly. Jessica reviewed the post carefully. Actually, this might work in your favor. The post doesn't mention Tommy's name or your family details, just the rescue itself. It portrays him as a compassionate child in a stable environment, which is exactly what we want to demonstrate to the court. As the adults discussed the implications of this unexpected publicity, Dr. Collins entered with news of her own. Luna's latest blood work shows significant improvement. I think we can start planning for her eventual release from intensive care. And though she'll need ongoing treatment for those leg wounds. Released to where? Robert asked. The regular shelter kennels wouldn't be appropriate for her condition. Emily hesitated. Ideally, she would go to a foster home with someone experienced. In medical cases, the puppies could join her once they're a bit stronger. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. It was Eleanor who finally spoke up. I could foster them. All eyes turned to her in surprise. I live alone in a ranch-style house with a fenced yard, Eleanor continued, her voice growing more confident. No stairs to navigate during Luna's recovery. I'm retired, so I'm home all day, and... She paused, meeting Martha's gaze directly. It would mean Tommy could continue his visits without disrupting the bonds that have formed. Jessica nodded approvingly. From a legal standpoint, maintaining routine and continuity would be viewed favorably by the court. Martha looked at her husband, a silent conversation passing between them. Robert cleared his throat. It's a generous offer, Ms. Murphy, but taking on 4 dogs, one with medical needs. Eleanor, she corrected gently. And I understand it's a significant responsibility. But sometimes life presents opportunities to make a difference that seem tailor-made for our specific circumstances. She glanced toward Tommy, who was oblivious to the adult conversation as he gently stroked Hope's tiny head. I have experience with rehabilitation cases. My late husband was a veterinarian. This new piece of information surprised everyone. Emily's professional interest was particularly piqued. You never mentioned that. It never seemed relevant. Until now, Eleanor replied simply. As the group continued discussing logistics, none of them noticed Tommy had moved from his seat and was now standing beside Luna's bed. Carefully, with a gentleness that belied his young age, he placed his small hand on the dog's head. Get better, he said clearly, his second and third words since the rescue, patting Luna's fur with determined tenderness. Tommy's words sent a wave of astonishment through the room. Martha's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes as she exchanged a look of disbelief with Robert. For months, specialists had told them that Tommy might remain non-verbal for years due to his trauma, yet here he was, speaking, not to them, but to a dog he'd known for less than 2 weeks. Dr. Collins, recognizing the profound significance of the moment, quietly ushered Sarah and Jessica out of the room, leaving the family and Eleanor to process what had just occurred. As they stood in the hallway, Emily couldn't help but shake her head in wonder. In 15 years of veterinary practice, I've seen animals help people heal in remarkable ways, but this is something else entirely. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. It's exactly the kind of evidence we need for the custody case. A child overcoming trauma through stable, supportive relationships, both human and animal. The following days brought a flurry of activity. Eleanor's home was inspected and approved for fostering. Specialized equipment was delivered for Luna's Continuing care and the nursery area for the puppies was set up in Eleanor's sunroom, a bright, warm space with views of her garden. When the day came to transfer Luna and her puppies to Eleanor's home, the procession resembled nothing so much as a carefully orchestrated medical transport. Dr. Collins insisted on personally overseeing the move, with Sarah driving the shelter's van specially equipped with monitoring devices. Tommy, unsurprisingly, was adamant about being present, pointing repeatedly to the van until Martha agreed he could ride along, secured safely in his car seat beside her. Eleanor had spent the previous days preparing her home with an almost manic energy. Her late husband's veterinary supplies, carefully preserved in the basement for over a decade, were brought out, sterilized, and arranged. The yard was meticulously checked for hazards, and a special ramp was constructed to help Luna navigate the 2 shallow steps to the back porch once she was able to walk again. As they pulled into Eleanor's driveway, Martha couldn't help but notice how perfect the setting seemed. A charming New England cottage with maple trees providing dappled shade over a lush lawn bordered by wildflowers that buzzed with late summer bees. It looked like something from a storybook, peaceful and secluded at the end of a quiet country lane. "Your home is beautiful," Martha commented as Eleanor welcomed them inside. "How long have you lived here?" A shadow of something, perhaps melancholy, passed briefly over Eleanor's face. "Almost 45 years now. James, my husband, built it himself when we were first married." The transition went remarkably, smoothly. Luna, though still weak, seemed to relax in the new environment, her eyes following Tommy as he explored the sunroom where her bed had been placed. The puppies, now 3 weeks old and beginning to show distinct personalities, were settled in a heated enclosure nearby, close enough for Luna to see and smell, but separated until Dr. Collins was confident Luna was strong enough to care for them directly. "This setup is perfect," Emily declared, making final adjustments to Luna's IV line. "Eleanor, you've thought of everything." Eleanor smiled, but there was a distracted quality to her expression as she watched Tommy sitting cross-legged beside Luna's bed, chattering in his newly discovered voice. Mostly single words punctuated by expressive hand gestures that the dog seemed to understand perfectly. "I had a lot of practice once," she said softly, more to herself than to Emily. The routine that developed over the next 2 weeks settled into a rhythm that brought unexpected peace to everyone involved. Martha or Robert would bring Tommy to Eleanor's house every morning on their way to work. Robert to his construction business, Martha to her part-time job at the local library. Eleanor would care for Tommy, Luna, and the puppies until the grandparents returned in the evening. On weekends, the entire Thompson family would often spend hours at Eleanor's home, helping with the dog's care and enjoying the tranquility of her garden. Luna's recovery continued to progress better than anyone had dared hope. The infection in her hind legs was finally clearing, and under Eleanor's diligent care, she had begun to put on weight. The puppies were thriving, their eyes open now, beginning to explore their enclosure with wobbly determination. Tommy, perhaps most remarkably of all, was speaking more each day, primarily single words, occasionally stringing 2 or 3 together. His therapist, who made a special house call to observe him with the dogs, was astounded by his progress. "Whatever is happening here," she told Martha after one session, "it's breaking through barriers that months of traditional therapy couldn't touch. There's something about this environment, these animals, this connection that's allowing Tommy to feel safe enough to re-engage with a world." It was during one of these peaceful afternoons, as Eleanor and Martha sat watching Tommy play with the now mobile puppies in the sunroom, that the first significant revelation occurred. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Martha began hesitantly, cradling her tea mug between her hands. "That first day, when you found Tommy with Luna, you mentioned having experience with children who communicate differently. You said you had a son once." Eleanor's hands stilled in her lap. For a long moment, she seemed to be deciding something internally. Finally, she took a deep breath. "His name was Michael," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on Tommy and the puppies. "He would be 47 this year if he had lived." Martha waited silently, sensing there was more to come. "Michael was special," Eleanor continued, her voice taking on a quality of careful control, "what they call non-neurotypical today. Back then, the term was autistic, though his specific diagnosis was more complex. He didn't speak until he was nearly 5, and even then, it was primarily to talk about animals. He had a connection with them that was almost otherworldly." She paused, watching as Hope, the smallest puppy, climbed determinedly into Tommy's lap. "When Michael was 4, we were visiting my sister's farm. He wandered off, so quickly, so quietly. We searched for hours before—" her voice faltered slightly, "before we found him in a pond on the property. The official determination was that he had been trying to help a trapped duckling." Martha reached out, covering Eleanor's hand with her own. "I'm so sorry." Eleanor nodded acknowledgement, composing herself. "The reason I'm telling you this now is because when I found Tommy that day, trying so earnestly to help Luna and her puppies, it was like seeing Michael again. The same pure intention, the same disregard for personal danger when another creature needed help." She turned to face Martha directly. "I've never told anyone this, but I believe Michael led me to that road that morning. I haven't walked that particular route in decades. It was always too painful being near water. But that day, something pulled me there. And when I saw Tommy," her voice broke slightly, "it was like the universe was offering a second chance, not to replace what I lost, but to honor it somehow." The profound silence that followed was broken only by Tommy's delighted giggle as Spirit, the largest puppy, attempted to chew on his shoelace. Martha was quiet for a long moment before responding. "I understand more than you might think," she finally said. "Lily, Tommy's mother, she was like that too as a child, so connected to animals, so sensitive to their needs. Before the addiction took hold, she was studying to be a veterinary technician. This new piece of information hung between them, adding another layer to the web of connections that seemed to be weaving their lives together." The moment was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Martha glanced at her. "Watch. That's early for Robert." Eleanor moved to the window. "It's not Robert. It's a woman I don't recognize." Martha joined her, peering out at the unfamiliar sedan. When the driver emerged, her face drained of color. "That's Lily, Tommy's mother." The next few minutes unfolded in a blur of tension. Lily, thin, nervous but clear-eyed and determined, stood on Eleanor's porch, demanding to see her son. Martha, positioned protectively in the doorway, tried to explain the court-ordered visitation schedule. "I don't care about schedules," Lily insisted, her voice rising. "I have a right to see my child. The hearing is next week, and I know they're going to try to take him from me permanently. I just want to see him now." Eleanor, assessing the volatile situation, made a quick decision. "Martha, why don't you bring Tommy to say hello to his mother while I make some fresh tea? We can all sit in the garden where it's peaceful." Martha hesitated, clearly torn between adherence to the court orders and compassion for her clearly distraught daughter. Finally, she nodded, turning back into the house to get Tommy from the sunroom. Left alone momentarily with Lily, Eleanor spoke gently. "You must be very proud of your son. He's quite remarkable." Lily's defensive posture softened slightly, surprise registering on her face at this unexpected kindness from a stranger. "He is," she agreed cautiously. "He always was. He's been helping care for a dog and her puppies," Eleanor continued conversationally, as if this impromptu visit were the most natural thing in the world. "He has quite a gift with animals." Something flickered across Lily's face. Pain, recognition, perhaps pride. "He gets that from me." she said softly. Then, with a vulnerability that belied her earlier aggression, she added, "At least he used to." When Martha returned with Tommy, the reunion between mother and son was both touching and awkward. Tommy clearly recognized Lily, reaching for her with a tentative "Mama" that made her eyes fill with tears. But there was also hesitation in his movements, a wariness that spoke volumes about the complicated history between them. As Eleanor had suggested, they moved to the garden, where the tension gradually eased in the tranquil setting. Tommy, after his initial greeting, became more interested in showing his mother the puppies, which Martha reluctantly agreed to after a reassuring nod from Eleanor. With Tommy scampering ahead, leading the way to the sunroom, Eleanor found herself walking beside Lily. "I'm not what they think I am," Lily said suddenly, her voice low and fierce. "I made mistakes, terrible ones, but I'm better now. I'm clean. I have been for 8 months. Eleanor neither agreed nor disagreed, simply asking, "What do you want for Tommy more than anything?" The question seemed to catch Lily off guard. She was silent for several steps before answering. "I want him to feel safe, to be happy." Her voice cracked slightly. "To talk again." "He is talking," Eleanor said gently. "Since he found Luna, the mother dog, and her puppies, just a few words but more each day." Lily stopped walking, her expression a complex mixture of joy and devastation. "He is?" Eleanor nodded. "His first word was mama, referring to Luna. His second was telling her to get better." Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. "Of course it would be animals that brought him back," she whispered. "Before everything went wrong, that was our special thing together. Rescuing strays, feeding birds. I used to dream of us working together someday, helping animals." She wiped her tears roughly with the back of her hand. "Another dream I destroyed." They had reached the sunroom door. Through the glass, they could see Tommy excitedly showing Martha which puppy was which, pointing and naming each one with growing confidence. The unexpected visit from Lily created ripples that expanded through everyone's lives in the days that followed. Robert was initially furious when he learned of the impromptu reunion, concerned about violations of the court order. Jessica Harlow, when consulted, agreed it had been technically inappropriate, but suggested they focus on the positive aspects, particularly how Tommy had responded to his mother. Courts are increasingly interested in collaborative custody arrangements when possible, Jessica explained during an emergency consultation at Eleanor's home the following day. If Lily is genuinely in recovery and Tommy responds well to her, a supervised visitation schedule might actually strengthen your position as primary caregivers rather than weakening it. Martha was skeptical. You didn't see how she was before. When the addiction had control, the broken promises, the disappearances, the dangerous situations Tommy was exposed to. I understand your concerns, Jessica assured her. But people do recover, and courts recognize that parental bonds are important even after significant challenges. Eleanor, who had been quietly observing the discussion while Tommy played with the puppies nearby, finally spoke up. Perhaps instead of viewing this as a battle with only one possible winner, we could consider what arrangement would truly be best for Tommy's healing. Her suggestion was met with mixed reactions: uncertainty from Martha, hesitation from Robert, interest from Jessica, but it planted a seed that would gradually take root in the days ahead. The custody hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning, leaving the weekend for intense preparation. Despite Jessica's recommendation that Tommy maintain his normal routine, there was an undeniable tension in the air whenever he visited Eleanor's to see Luna and the puppies. Everyone was acutely aware that the carefully constructed daily rhythm that had brought such healing might soon be disrupted, regardless of the court's decision. Luna, now able to stand and walk short distances, seemed to sense the anxiety surrounding her human visitors. She had become increasingly protective of Tommy, positioning herself near him whenever possible and watching the adults with attentive, intelligent eyes. On Sunday afternoon, as Martha and Robert prepared to take Tommy home after their daily visit, Luna did something unprecedented. As Tommy headed toward the door, she struggled to her feet and followed him, moving slowly but determinedly across the sunroom floor, her first significant independent movement since her rescue. "Look," Eleanor exclaimed, drawing everyone's attention to the German Shepherd's wobbly but purposeful progress. Tommy turned back, his face lighting up with joy. "Luna, walk!" he proclaimed, his two-word sentence clear and excited. Dr. Collins, who happened to be there for a routine checkup, watched in professional amazement. "This is remarkable progress," she noted, quickly moving to support Luna before her weakened legs gave out. Her determination to reach Tommy has accomplished what might have taken weeks of physical therapy. As they settled Luna back on her bed, with Tommy now insisting on staying close to her, Martha pulled Eleanor aside. "I've been thinking about what you said, about finding an arrangement that prioritizes Tommy's healing." Eleanor nodded encouragingly, but remained silent, allowing Martha to continue at her own pace. "What if?" Martha hesitated, the words difficult to formulate. "What if we proposed a shared custody arrangement, but with a unique component? What if Eleanor's home became a supervised visitation location where Lily could spend time with Tommy while he continues his connection with Luna and the puppies?" Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. "You'd trust me to supervise these visits?" "You were a school teacher for 30 years, Martha pointed out. "You have experience with children, you understand trauma, and most importantly, you see the best in everyone involved. You saw potential in Lily when Robert and I could only see threat." The idea, while initially met with resistance from Robert, gained traction when Jessica confirmed it could strengthen their legal position considerably. "It shows extraordinary good faith and focus on Tommy's well-being," she explained. "It also creates a controlled environment for assessing Lily's commitment to recovery and rebuilding her relationship with her son." The day of the custody hearing arrived with a surprising development. As the Thompsons prepared to leave for court, with Eleanor planning to stay behind with Luna and the puppies, a call came from Jessica. "Lily's requested a pre-hearing mediation," she reported, excitement evident in her voice. "She wants to discuss a collaborative custody arrangement. She specifically mentioned maintaining Tommy's connection with the dogs as a priority." The mediation, held in a small conference room at the courthouse, was emotionally charged, but remarkably productive. Lily, supported by her own attorney and a counselor from her recovery program, presented a proposal that aligned surprisingly well with what Martha had suggested to Eleanor. "I want my son back in my life," Lily stated, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "But I recognize that my parents have been his stability through my worst times. I also understand that his connection with Luna and her puppies has been critical to his healing." She took a deep breath before continuing. "What I'm proposing is a step-up plan. I'll continue living in my sober living house while attending daily recovery meetings and completing my veterinary technician certification. I'll have supervised visits with Tommy at Eleanor Murphy's home 3 times a week, where I can be part of his interaction with the dogs." She looked directly at her parents. "As I demonstrate consistent sobriety and reliable parenting, we can gradually increase my time with Tommy and eventually transition to unsupervised visits. My goal is co-parenting, not taking him away from you." The judge, who had agreed to sit in on the mediation, nodded approvingly. "This shows remarkable maturity and focus on your child's needs, Ms. Thompson." By early afternoon, an agreement had been drafted, reviewed by both parties' attorneys, and approved by the judge. The Thompsons would retain primary physical custody of Tommy, with Lily granted supervised visitation rights that would expand based on her continued recovery progress and Tommy's comfort level. Most significantly, Eleanor's home was officially designated as the primary visitation location, with Eleanor named as both supervisor and mediator, a role the judge deemed appropriate given her background in education and her unique position in the situation. When they returned to Eleanor's house to share the news, they found Dr. Collins on the porch, her expression a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "You won't believe what's happening," she said, leading them quickly to the sunroom. "Luna's walking on her own, actually walking to each puppy and checking on them. It's like she knew today was important and decided she needed to be fully back on duty as a mother." The sight that greeted them was indeed remarkable. Luna, though still thin and moving with careful deliberation, was making a circuit around the puppy enclosure, pausing to nuzzle each of her offspring through the mesh barrier. The puppies, now fully mobile and increasingly vocal, pressed against the enclosure wall, eager for their mother's attention. "I think it's time," Emily said, reaching for the enclosure door. "Luna's strong enough now to be reunited with her babies." As they watched, Emily carefully opened the gate and lifted each puppy out, placing them on a soft blanket beside Luna. The reunion was everything they could have hoped for. Gentle licks, soft whimpers of recognition, and eventually all three puppies curling up against their mother's warm side as she looked on with unmistakable canine contentment. Tommy, who had been watching from Martha's arms, wiggled to be put down. Moving with the careful deliberation that adults had taught him around the recovering dog, he sat beside Luna and gently stroked her head. "Good mama," he said clearly, then pointed to himself and added, "Tommy see my mama too." Martha's eyes filled with tears at this evidence that Tommy had understood at least some of the day's proceedings. "That's right, sweetheart. You'll be seeing your mama Lily more often now." 3 months later, Eleanor's house had been transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The sunroom, once her quiet reading retreat, was now a combination puppy playroom and family visitation space. Luna had recovered fully from her ordeal, though scars on her hind legs would always remain as testimony to her journey. The puppies, Hope, Faith, and Spirit, had grown into healthy, energetic young dogs who brought chaos and joy in equal measure. Most remarkably, what had begun as a court-mandated supervised visitation arrangement had evolved into something that felt increasingly like an extended family. Lily, now 7 months into her training program and still maintained perfect attendance at her recovery meetings, had become a regular presence, not just during her scheduled visits with Tommy, but also as a volunteer apprentice to Dr. Collins, who had recognized Lily's natural talent with animals and offered her part-time work at the shelter. Tommy, now approaching his 3rd birthday, was speaking in complete sentences, his vocabulary growing daily, particularly when it came to animals. His therapist had reduced their sessions to monthly check-ins, declaring his progress remarkable by any standard. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves drifted down around Eleanor's garden, the entire unexpected family gathered to celebrate Luna's official adoption. While the puppies had been legally adopted weeks earlier, Hope by the Thompsons, Faith by Dr. Collins, and Spirit by Sarah Jenkins, Luna's status had remained in limbo as her medical treatment continued. Now, with her health fully restored, and her puppies thriving in their new homes, it was time to make her permanent placement official. Eleanor, who had grown deeply attached to the dignified German Shepherd during their months together, had initially assumed she would be Luna's forever home. But as she watched the family dynamics evolve, a different solution had presented itself. "Are you sure about this?" Martha asked as they prepared for the small ceremony Dr. Collins had arranged. Eleanor nodded, watching as Lily helped Tommy attach a special tag to Luna's new collar. "Completely sure. She belongs with them." "Say," decision to have Luna officially adopted by Lily, with the understanding that the dog would split her time between Lily's new apartment and the Thompsons' home, just as Tommy would eventually, had seemed increasingly obvious as Lily's recovery had strengthened and her bond with both Tommy and Luna had deepened. It gives them all something to share, Eleanor explained, and it gives Lily additional responsibility and purpose, which her counselor agrees is important for her continued recovery. As they gathered in a circle in Eleanor's garden, Dr. Collins presented Lily with Luna's official adoption papers. Luna's journey reminds us that healing is possible even from the most desperate circumstances, she said, her veterinarian's clinical demeanor softened by evident emotion. She protected her puppies with everything she had, and in return, she found a community that helped her heal. Tommy, standing between his mother and grandmother with Luna sitting attentively at his side, reached down to pat the dog's head. Luna found her family, he said clearly, his vocabulary now including complex concepts that continued to amaze everyone who had known him during his non-verbal period. Just like me. Later, as the small celebration continued on the porch with cake for the humans and special treats for the dogs, Eleanor found herself standing slightly apart, watching the scene with a sense of wonder. What had begun with a moment of pure chance, her decision to walk down that particular road on that specific morning had expanded into something that had healed not just Luna and her puppies, not just Tommy, but an entire network of people who might otherwise never have connected. Robert approached, offering her a cup of tea. "Penny, for your thoughts." Eleanor smiled, accepting the tea gratefully. "I was just thinking about how life works in circles. 40 years ago, I lost Michael because he wandered off trying to help an animal. I spent decades wondering why him, why that day, why that moment. I never found those answers." She paused, watching as Tommy demonstrated to Lily exactly how Luna preferred to have her ears scratched. But finding Tommy that day, seeing him trying so earnestly to help Luna and her puppies, it didn't erase the past, but it gave it new meaning. Like the universe was saying, this is why, so you would be exactly who you needed to be, exactly where you needed to be when this child and these animals needed you. Robert nodded thoughtfully. Martha and I have had similar thoughts. All those years of pain watching Lily struggle with addiction, feeling like we'd failed her somehow, and yet it gave us Tommy. And now, seeing Lily finding her way back to herself through this connection with animals that she and Tommy share. It doesn't erase the hard years, but it casts them in a different light. Life rarely gives us neat, tidy endings, Eleanor observed, but sometimes, if we're very fortunate, it gives us new beginnings that help us make peace with the endings we didn't choose. As if on cue, Luna rose from her place beside Tommy and walked deliberately across the porch to where Eleanor stood. The German shepherd pressed gently against her leg in a gesture of canine affection that needed no translation. Eleanor bent down, scratching behind Luna's ears just the way she had learned the dog preferred. "You're welcome," she whispered, answering the unspoken gratitude. "It was my honor to be part of your journey." On the lawn, Tommy had begun an improvised game of fetch with Hope, Faith and Spirit, who had been brought along for the celebration. The three young dogs, now inseparable once again despite their separate homes, bounded after the soft toy with exuberant energy, while Tommy's laughter, once so rare, rang out in the clear autumn air. Lily, watching from the porch steps, caught Eleanor's eye and smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and spoke of hope reclaimed, of promises kept, of bridges being carefully rebuilt. Martha stood beside her daughter, their shoulders touching in a casual closeness that would have been unimaginable months earlier. What had begun with a muffled cry from a ditch on a cloudy morning had expanded into a tapestry of connection that none of them could have foreseen. A reminder that sometimes the smallest beings can initiate the greatest rescues, and that Healing, when it comes, often arrives in the most unexpected forms. Dear listeners, we hope the journey of Tommy, Luna, and the unexpected family they created has touched your heart. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore life's complexity and the healing power of connection. And if Tommy and Luna's story resonated with you, we'd love to hear about the special animals that have changed your life. We'll be waiting for you in the comments.